Cerro Maravilla massacre. The Cerro Maravilla murders, also known as the Cerro Maravilla massacre, occurred on July 25, 1978 at Cerro Maravilla, a mountain in Ponce, Puerto Rico, wherein two young Puerto Rican pro-independence activists, Carlos Enrique Soto Uribe and Arnaldo Dario Rosado Torres, were murdered in a Puerto Rico police ambush. The incident and subsequent events have become one of the most controversial events in Puerto Rico's political history, frequently called the worst political cover-up in the history of the island. Around noon July 25, 1978, Carlos Enrique Soto Uribe and Arnaldo Dario Rosado, two independence activists of the armed revolutionary movement, along with undercover police officer Alejandro Gonzalez Malal, posing as a fellow group member, took taxi driver hostage and ordered him to drive them to Cerro Maravilla, where several communication towers were located. Their original plan was to take control of the towers and read a manifesto protesting the imprisonment of Puerto Rican nationalists in the United States. State police officers were alerted of their plan prior to their arrival, and the activists were ambushed and shot. The undercover agent received a minor bullet wound during the shooting, while the taxi driver was left relatively unharmed. The morning after the shootings, the officers argued that they acted in self-defense, stating that they ordered the activists to surrender, at which time the activists started shooting at them and they returned fire. Initially, the taxi driver said he was under the dashboard of his cab when the shooting started and could not see who shot first, although he contradicted his statement a few days later in an interview, stating that he ducked under the dashboard of the car after the three men, the two activists, and the undercover agent left the car, and that he saw 10 heavily armed men approaching. When he emerged from the car, he saw the three men alive, and two of them were being beaten by the armed men, who were later identified as policemen. The governor of Puerto Rico, Carlos Romero Barceló, praised the officers in a televised address by calling them heroic, stating that they acted in self-defense and stopped a terrorist attack. 2 days later, in a follow-up interview, the taxi driver stated that when the first shooting occurred, he heard one of his three passengers shout, "I'm an agent. Don't shoot me, I'm an agent," while the others called for help and shouted, "I give up." He saw 10 heavily armed men approaching, later identified as police agents, when the three passengers exited the car, and the taxi driver was ordered at gunpoint to exit the vehicle. He was extracted by an agent, kicked, and taken away from the scene. While being escorted, he saw the two activists directly in front of his vehicle being beaten by the armed men. Facing public pressure due to the taxi driver's conflicting statements, Governor Romero Barceló ordered 2 separate investigations by the Justice Department in addition to the ongoing standard police investigation, all of which concluded that the officers' actions were free of any wrongdoing, despite various inconsistencies in their stories. Puerto Rico District Attorney informed reporters on July 29th, 4 days after the incident, that the Justice Department's investigation revealed no massacre, no beatings, and no aggressions, except for the shootings that occurred in Cerro Maravilla. Opposing political parties, mainly the Popular Democratic Party, insisted that the investigations were just cover-ups and demanded that a special independent prosecutor be assigned to investigate. 2 special investigations by the U.S. Justice Department's Civil Rights Division and by the U.S. Federal Bureau of Investigation (FBI) were performed on separate occasions between 1978 and 1980, which confirmed the conclusions of the Justice Department that the officers acted in self-defense. In the November 1980 general elections, Governor Romero Barceló was re-elected by a margin of 3,503 votes, though his party lost control of the state legislature to the main opposition party. The legislature quickly started new inquiries and hearings into the Cerro Maravilla incident. The Senate spearheaded the investigations by naming a former assistant district attorney to investigate. The second investigation, performed between 1981 and 1984, uncovered a plot to assassinate the activists and a possible, though not conclusive, conspiracy to cover up these actions. During interviews of the Senate Investigations Committee in 1983, a detective in the Intelligence Division of the Puerto Rico Police Department testified, "When I arrived at the scene, one saw 4 police officers aiming their guns at the 2 activists who were kneeling before them. I turned my eyes away and heard 5 gunshots. He was offered immunity for his testimony, added that several hours before the shooting. He and other officers were told by the commander of the intelligence division that these terrorists should not come down from the mountain alive. His testimony was corroborated by another officer who, although he did not witness the fatal shooting, confirmed many details. Other inquiries obtained similar testimony from witnesses, including the taxi driver, who now stated that the activists were alive and disarmed when the police removed him from the scene. The taxi driver stated that there was a short exchange of gunfire, and when he was removed to another place nearby he heard a second volley of gunfire, but was asked by the police and investigators of the PR Justice Department to forget about the second round of shots. The statement regarding 2 different volleys of shots was upheld by various people. Subsequently, the legislature and local press started questioning the actions of the Puerto Rico police, the Puerto Rico Justice Department, the U.S. Justice Department, and the FBI actions during the first investigation, alleging corruption within the agencies and a conspiracy to cover up evidence. Letters were sent by various community and political leaders to then Senate Judiciary Committee of the U.S. asking for an inquiry into the conduct of the federal investigations. Several letters even accused former U.S. Attorney General of providing aid to Gov. Romero Barcelo during the investigations. The U.S. Justice Department announced that due to lack of evidence, it was bringing its investigation of the case to an end. A Justice Department internal memorandum that was issued that the investigations were closed, even when agents were still investigating important evidence of the case that could potentially incriminate the officers, including several unexplained contusions on a victim's face, and the fact that one of the police officers recanted his original story, stating that there was in fact 2 bursts of firing. These and several other accusations brought public and political pressure to the investigating agencies. This led to internal revisions of evidence and procedures from the first investigations both at the local and federal level, though all organizations still adamantly denied any cover-up. These second investigations led to reassignments, demotions, and resignations among top officials within the PR Justice Department, including 3 different PR Secretaries of Justice equivalent to the U.S. State Attorney General accepting and resigning their posts in a span of 6 months. On November 29, 1983, 3 prosecutors were relieved of their duties after a report by the State Senate Investigations Committee found they had failed to properly investigate the Cerro Maravilla shootings, citing 101 specific deficiencies in 2 investigations. This was the 3rd State Attorney General to oversee the investigation since the shootings occurred in 1978. The second investigations led to 10 officers being indicted and found guilty of perjury, destruction of evidence, and obstruction of justice, 4 of which were convicted of second-degree murder in 1984.